Yo, good evening, Black Factor family. It is your host, Brian Forbes, and of course, once again, here we are on this wonderful Wednesday evening. This is the Black Factor. This is where perspective is everything, and we have the news that you can use. Because you know the truth never cares what your opinion is. Just for the record, just in case you didn't know. That's the reality of where we are and what we deal with every single day on this show. So, my man Big Nate is in the building. It's good to see you, my brother. Thank you for checking in. I'm gonna get into a little bit of, y'all know I like to get into the history. We're gonna get into some of the history, and we're gonna get into some of the what's happening right now. But I'm gonna jump into a couple other things right quick before we get that thing cranked up. And don't forget, y'all catch me on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. We cut out a couple of other hosts because we weren't getting any real action from over there. So I just decided to kind of consolidate. You know, we breaking things down, getting a little fine-tuned around here, you understand me? So that's what's happening. To my Oh So Smooth Radio family, thank you for checking in. That's my man Shorty Smooth over there, the operator and proprietor of Oh So Smooth Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to check this show out one day and you're not wanting to be just, online, you can always go and download the app, the Oh So Smooth Radio app, at Play Store or at Apple iTunes. Just for the record, I want to thank y'all for checking in. My people, right quick, we're going to get this party started. Y'all hold. All right. So look here, y'all. Check this. Y'all remember a few, was it last year when the protesters were out and they were doing their thing, about, all the civil rights stuff going on, all the shenanigans we dealing with. And the guy and his wife who jumped outside with their guns and was pointing them at protesters as they walked past their house. Well, this guy is running for the Senate. He's going to run for Senate here coming up, which I think is quite hilarious. He's talking about how, trouble came to his front door and he didn't back down and all of this nonsense. All right, bruh. Sadly, we have a contingent of people in this country who are actually going to support this clown, amazingly enough. But what are you going to do? I mean, it's a joke to me. And also, Cynthia TG, thank you for checking in. I see you, Mr. Marcus Howard, my man, the counselor. Val Wells is in the building. Regina Freeman and Riri in the building. Got Houston. We got Chicago. We got some everywhere, all up in here. That's what's happening. But look, check this out, y'all. How many of you have invested in cryptocurrency? Man, y'all. That thing is tanking right now on all levels. They're saying that there's a possibility that even, for example, Bitcoin is about to take a serious tank. It's about to, the bottom gonna fall out. That's I don't know. I mean, you can call it a rumor, you can call it whatever you want. You got all kind of people who invest in, they're prognosticators and things of that nature. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm just putting the word out there. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just saying, pay attention. If you are invested, depending on how heavily invested you are in your cryptocurrencies, you need to be paying attention. Because I can tell you right now, what I got done went through the flow. But it's okay. I mean, I ain't got enough money in it to care. But, I'll take what I can get. But in the meantime and in between time, we'll wait and see if that thing, turn around and go the other way. Two things are for sure in this world, y'all. Death and taxes. And it appears that taxes are about to catch up with y'all's boy, DJT, the Flim Flam man. So Trump is now being, his organization is now being investigated. First, they were being investigated on civil charges, and now they're being investigated on criminal charges because the New York Attorney General then jumped in the fray. So now it ain't just the New York AG, it's the state AG, and they're looking right now at his the CFO of his organization, and they're about to put the pressure on him. And I suspect that there are going to be some screws turned, some turnovers going on, and some folks rolling over. So it's going to get real interesting on that end. This cat's name is Alan Weisberg. That's the CFO of the Trump organization, the so-called non-for-profit, which we know they was using to do other things because his attorney testified to that in front of Congress last year before they locked him up, or year before last. So this is going to get real interesting. And also, and right quick, before I get too far off of that track, because I'm going away from this in a minute, but before I get too far off of that track, one other good thing is that today the House voted to have the commission on the January 6th insurrection, and 35 Republicans broke ranks and went and voted to have this commission. So if we can get that same thing to happen in the Senate, it's going to be real good. And Trump this time with these criminal charges, he's not going to be able to protect himself with presidential privilege and tell who can talk and who can't. So it's going to be real interesting. All right, now it's time to get down to the black side of the game, because this is the black factor, and we deal with all things black. And, I got to throw that other stuff in there because it does affect us. We are a factor, but some of these things affect us. So we have to cover that little stuff right quick. I wanted to make that fast, so I got that out the way. Let me right now say with reverence, happy 96th born day to El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, my man Malcolm X. This would have been his 96th birthday. Born this day in 1925 and cut down at the age of 39, assassinated for believing that black people in America could and should succeed by, of course, any means necessary. His quotes are too numerous to count and his knowledge too deep to be accepted by most, including his own. You can have a cure for all of the ills of the world, but if the world is not prepared to receive those cures, then they can turn on you. They can become your nemesis. The world may attack you for your knowledge. Ask me how I know. Hell, even Jesus was betrayed by his own and killed by the state. So we already know no one else is exempt. I was going to drop this little knowledge on you, but I think I'm going to add this to something else. Let me also say on today, I am sad to announce the transition of my man, Paul Mooney. My man, born Paul Gladney. Mooney was his stage name. Born in Shreveport, Louisiana in 1941, the social critic. And he has had many acting roles and comedy acts. And of course, we all know that he was one hell of a comedic writer. Now, I'm going to just tell y'all, he's one of those people that I guess created the need for political correctness. Because if you ever remember watching Sanford and Son or All in the Family and some of those other shows, which he did definitely have a hand in writing material for, you'll know that, the nigger was a rolled off the tongues of most on television back in those days just as easily as anything else. He basically was a person who said what all the rest of us were thinking, for the most part. He had a way with his social commentary that caused people to think and make people have to pay attention. I can tell you this. I've seen him. I've been around him. As you can tell by the photograph I put up here. I've enjoyed his comedy. I've enjoyed his commentary more than anything else, his social commentary. I think one thing that bothers me, though, about comedy and social commentary, the mixture of the two, is that we're still living in a time almost where in order to make certain social comments and they be digested by the general public, someone has to give the comic relief. The comic relief element has to be put into place in order for people to accept certain ideas and things. And I think that's kind of messed up that we still have to laugh it off. And it kind of reminds me of a time when black people in America were not allowed, so to speak, to say certain things or or act confident, they were considered arrogant. And in fact, after having to accept ill treatment by white people, they were supposed to smile and accept it and take it. And one of the highlights of tonight's show, it kind of just came this way. And I'm going to read several quotes from this particular gentleman, who, by the way, was a president of these United States. And what Paul Mooney talks about is, there's a quote by Lyndon B. Johnson, that is the president that we're going to gravitate toward in terms of quotes today, because in case you didn't know, although he is the one who signed the part of the civil rights acts and different things in the 60s, he was a staunch racist. A lot of people don't really know that, or don't realize that. But one of his quotes, and this is in regard to us sort of having to accept our position or station in America. He said, as long as you are black, and you're going to be black until the day you die, no one's going to call you by your goddamn name. So no matter what you are called, nigger, you just let it roll off your back like water, and you'll make it. Just pretend you're a goddamn piece of furniture. Now, he said this to his chauffeur, Robert Parker, because Parker told him that he'd prefer to be referred to by his name rather than boy, nigger, or chief. And that was what that sitting president told him was his better bet. So in other words, we are expected to accept our stations. And still today, unfortunately, a lot of that holds true currently in our social structure and social settings in America. Paul Mooney, he wrote for Richard Pryor on Saturday Night Live when he was on that show. He was a co-writer for many of his albums, Sunset Strip, Bicentennial Nigga, and Is It Something I Said, as well as on his films, JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling. He also is the pioneer and gave many, many breaks to lots of other comedic actors and actresses, including Paul Williams, Sandra Bernhard, Marsha Warfield, John Witherspoon, and Tim Reed. So, he had his hand in making careers. He wrote for, of course, you all know, Sanford and Son, Good Times, did the movie Which Way Is Up, Bustin' Loose, Hollywood Shuffle, with Robert Townsend. He was the head writer for In Living Color. So you want to know why In Living Color was so damn funny in the 80s when we watched that? Or was it the 90s? I don't remember. In the 90s. And he is the inspiration for Homie the Clown. And, of course, he appeared on Dave Chappelle's show, on many occasions. And he actually ad-libbed. I don't know if y'all remember the skit that he did on there called Ask a Black Dude. Well, he actually ad-libbed all the answers on that show, which I thought was quite hilarious. Now, he was criticized for making light of anything. He literally made a joke about the death of Diana Ross's husband and about the Boston Marathon, and he alluded to the fact that he said white folks deserve to get blown up. So that was Paul Mooney in the nutshell, and he didn't bite his tongue, and he was very unapologetic. And again, like I said, sometimes he said things that other people were actually thinking. Now, let's get into the topic at hand for the day. We're going to talk about Andrew Brown Jr. and the historical lack of transparency that we deal with in regard to the criminal justice system in America. And I'm bringing this up because we are faced with this prosecutor who in North Carolina decided he was not going to prosecute these officers who killed Andrew Brown Jr. Now, apparently, Andrew Brown Jr. was a repeat offender. He was a felonious actor on more than one occasion. To that I say, so what? Because that has absolutely nothing to do with his murder. Now, let me get to this. In 1669, y'all like, damn, 1669, this is 2021. No, well, check this out. In 1669, Virginia passed an act regarding the casual killing of slaves. Okay. It was called the Casual Killing Act. Now, what that meant was if any slave resists his master or overseer, now remember also that during that time, anyone white was considered a master, more or less. If they told a black person, slave, what to do, a subordinate, then that was what it was. And if you didn't do that, then you could be corrected, as they call it, chastised, beaten, and so on. The funny thing is, even at that time, you got to remember too, kids, even children were considered master to many slaves. And you know, it's funny, if you ever go back to any of the movies in the 20s and 30s of black and whites, and you see a black person playing alongside a white person, even a child, and I give you a prime example, Shirley Temple, for example, the black man who seemed to follow her around in a slave type capacity throughout the entire movies, he always referred to her as Miss, and she always referred to him by his first name. And I guess to keep it neat, she didn't call him boy. But the point is that all through these movies and things like that, this is the way they were portrayed, because that was the closest to the reality that they were living. And this is even after the institution of slavery had been supposedly abolished. If any slave resists his master or any other white person of authority who attempts to correct the slave, and in the process of correcting the slave should die. The slave's death would not be considered a felony. The master would not face charges of murder. Now, I'm telling you this for a reason. I'm going somewhere with this. Okay? Now, remember what I said. The master would not face charges of murder in correcting a slave. This further devaluing the life of black people. Now, remember, this is 1669 when this ideology was put into play, which, of course, spread throughout the South and enslaved states. I can't even say arguably, I believe that this same behavior and same attitude filtered out and is still a part of our society today. And this is the attitude that has carried forward into our current society. The Casual Killing Act, to me, and in fact, equals what we refer to as qualified immunity with police officers. Now, what is qualified immunity with police? It is the thing that allows them to commit a murder on a person, not have to make an immediate statement, remain silent, wait for legal counsel, wait for their union, wait for everybody to make up any kind of way for them to protect themselves so that they don't face prosecution. Even with body cam now. Now we have body cameras, and they don't mean anything. I'm going to get to that. Let's also remember, we did a show last year here where we discussed the police departments, their origin, and the militias, which of course goes back to, for example, when we talk about 1669 Casual Killing Act, part of those overseers and individuals who would into the 1800s patrol the roads, that was the militia, who would make sure that there were no slaves attempting an insurrection, attempting to escape, attempting to hide contraband, and so on. The militia, who have eventually and to date turned into what we are now affectionately know as our police and sheriff's departments. Now, qualified immunity. This is what we're talking about. Why? Because this country, from 1669 with the Casual Killing Act, is rooted in racism. Moving forward, we're dealing with another Lyndon Johnson quote, and this is one of the ones that stays with me a lot. Well, before I even read that one, let me give you this one. And it just shows you how even from 1669 all the way up into the 1960s, these Negroes, they're getting pretty uppity these days. And that's a problem for us since they've got something now they never had before, the political pull to back up their uppityness. Now we've got to do something about this. We've got to give them a little something, just enough to quiet them down. Not enough to make a difference. For if we don't move at all, then their allies will line up against us and there'll be no way of stopping them. We'll lose the filibuster and there'll be no way of putting the brake on all sorts of wild legislation. It'll be Reconstruction all over again. Now, he said this to another senator, Richard Russell, a Democrat in Georgia, regarding the Civil Rights Act of 1957. Now, one of his quotes that is true, that I've heard repeatedly, and it makes all the sense in the world. And if you pay attention, you'll realize that it also is very true still today. If you can convince the lowest white man that he is better than the best colored man. Now I want y'all, while you processing that, I want you to, that part, think about the district attorney in North Carolina and those who converged on Mr. Brown's home and murdered him in his driveway. If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. He'll give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. This is what we are faced with right now today. You still have people like the guy that I mentioned at the top of the show, who stood out in front of his home brandishing an AR-15 and his wife with a gun, looking like she's never shot a gun before in her life, telling the world that he stood his ground and he defended his home against invaders, and this whole delusional idea that he got in his head. He in his mind believes that he is better than everybody out there. He believes that he had the right to point his gun at people who weren't even paying him any attention. This is what we're dealing with. If the tree of racism is planted, it's going to bear the fruit of racism. You're not going to plant an apple tree and it's going to produce lemons. This country is rooted. The tree of racism was planted in this country centuries ago. And I really am reluctant to believe that that's going to ever change. It doesn't one day change. And the fruit that it bears is going to still produce racism. That's just not something we're going to get around. The whole tree got to get cut down first. As my man Dick Gregory once said, white is not a color, it's an attitude. I mean, think about it. The very first reaction you get from racist white folks to an educated, confident, what they would call arrogant, or a successful black person is to threaten violence, suggest that they don't have a job, or make some sort of death threats. You know, it's funny to me. Black people get these labels, but I don't know anybody that when they don't like something going on in politics, they call a senator and threaten to kill them or threaten to do something to their family. I'm sorry. I just don't know anybody like that. That's just not how we get out. And again, it goes back to, here we are in America. We can't get an anti-lynching bill passed that's been on the table now for almost, I think, 75 years. This bill has not passed and been signed into law yet. But the Asian American Pacific Islander law to protect them got swept right through. LGBTQ are protected now by law. But on black folks, it's open season. Now, the law can be very clear. However, the way the law is applied to people of color is very different than the way it's applied to others. And when I say others, I mean white folks. Y'all know that. Examples of this are riddled throughout history. And there are far too many of these examples to even begin to think about trying to count them all. Y'all know. Their necessity to remain in power is real. And y'all know what I always say. Power concedes nothing without demand. And we have yet to demand power. You know what? Today, y'all, I ran across, and I'm going to do my homework on this guy. And if y'all find out anything about him, let me know. Because I'm really looking into this cat. And I'm finding out that information is very difficult to come by. There's a guy by the name of Dan Watts, who apparently was an activist of sorts during the 60s, and I'm guessing into the 70s. I'm still looking because I'm struggling to find information about him. I ran across him in a documentary that I was watching, and they put his name up, and the things he was saying I found to be very, very interesting, because he was, in so many words, condemning most of the black organizations at that time, and he made a statement that I thought was very interesting. He said, basically, y'all can keep your civil rights. Give us the money and the power and we'll go mind our business. I thought that was pretty interesting. So I'm looking into this guy. Dan Watts is his name. And he talked very much, talked about that concept. Anyway, the necessity to remain in power, of course, for them is real. The prison industrial complex is very real. And we know that there have been judges who have been caught trying to feed these private prisons by railroading black folks into that system. Now we know that, and here's where I struggle. Well, I don't know. I don't struggle. I mean, it's the reality of what we are and where we are and what's going on. And this is where we get into the depth of the Andrew Brown situation. The law is clear. It's written very precisely. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with legal writings and things like that, but every word matters in a legal brief. Every word matters in a legal case. The way the words are arranged, the way they're situated, you can ask the same question and one be more relevant than the other, but the same question. But in the terms of the law itself, discretion is what makes the difference. The way the law is applied is what makes the difference. The discretion of the individual who chooses to use a law as a weapon, and those who intend to use the law as a tool. And amazingly, I have witnessed on more than one occasion, actually too many occasions, where the law has been used as a weapon against an individual. It's about how it's applied. It's about how it's interpreted. And that is the crazy thing about the law, because there unfortunately is sometimes room for interpretation. The DA in North Carolina, who feels that the Casual Killing Act is still in full effect. And I think that his attitude exemplifies that it's okay to have killed Andrew Brown in their attempt at correcting him. That was their attempt to correct a black man who was out of line with the law. So in the process of his death, he was murdered. And of course, like I read to you in the beginning, the 1669 law, the casual killing of slaves. If any slave resists his master and is killed, In the process, he will not be prosecuted for murder. It will just be another dead nigga. That same attitude still applies. Ask the DA in North Carolina. So, in their head, or in his head, it was a justifiable killing. But I have a few questions about that so-called killing, or justifiable killing. Why, and this is where the transparency part comes in, why have we not seen the rest of the videos from the other officers at the scene of the killing? He had a press conference the other day where he showed about a minute of videotape from one officer's camera that allowed him to pick the vantage point that he wanted to show from so that he could try and make the case as judge and jury in front of the press that those officers were justified in murdering a black man. They were justified in the killing of an individual who posed actually no threat to any of them. Now, according to him, which is his interpretation, and like I said, the truth doesn't care about your opinion, but they don't want the truth to come out, which is why they are hiding the rest of the video by law. What good are body cams when they can't be examined, when nobody can see them? What good are they? See, there again, where we get into the law. Y'all got to remember now, there was a time when it was legal to hang black people. There's a time when it was legal and acceptable for black folks to be murdered. There was a time when it was legal for black people to have to enter a building from the rear or wherever, and water fountains designated only as black. The list goes on. Remember, the law and who writes them matters. North Carolina needs to have the laws changed. The people of North Carolina must change the laws. You know something else I realized today? I don't know how many times I've heard Regina Freeman said, according to Facebook, lynching is suicide. Exactly, Regina. You remember that, what I talked about on that show. That's exactly right. I find it interesting that in North Carolina, these people are angry about the protests that are taking place. But I realized today, after some research on some other things, I don't think I ever realized just how aggravated and angry white people become when black people protest. I watched a young white male, going apeshit about protesters. And this was in the 60s. Why do they have to protest? Can't we just talk? Talk? Maybe he must have missed all the talks that have been going on for the last 150 years. I noticed that when Dr. King and other organizations during the 60s and the civil rights movement marched on Selma, for example, on Washington, that really pisses white people off. And I'm really trying to understand why is there such anger at a people who are trying to achieve some level of justice? Are you really that angry that you don't want anyone else to be happy, to have equality, to enjoy any levels of success? You know, we have a thing, there's a word, meritocracy. Before I get to that, another Lyndon Johnson quote. Until justice is blind to color, until education is unaware of race, until opportunity is unconcerned with the color of men's skins, emancipation will be a proclamation but not a fact. I think that's pretty deep. It has become more, and now because I know that marching aggravates certain individuals so much, now I'm really for it. I think it's a great thing. You know, they say if you're getting on somebody's nerves that bad, you must be doing something right. You got to be doing something right, because otherwise, what would they be upset about? Regina Freeman says they have something to say when blacks quietly protest, but have nothing to say when the supremacists violently protest. Well, you know what, Regina, to that I say, we can't win either way. No matter what level of protest that we attempt or have ever attempted, there has always been a backlash. We are not supposed to want better for ourselves. And even in attempting to obtain some levels of equality and freedom, that I think is offensive to many, because they don't want you uppity Negroes to think that, like Lyndon Johnson said, you're on their level. All you have to do is give them, and when I say them, white men, somebody to look down on, and they'll empty their pockets for you. They will pay happily to have a group of individuals beneath them. I'm going to read the quote again. If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. See, this is one of the things that I recognized many years ago, and this was back when George Bush was in office. It occurred to me that every single election cycle, wealthy white people use poor and uneducated, remember Donald Trump loves the uneducated, white folks to do their bidding. It is the most amazing thing I have ever seen before. These people are no better off than the lowest black man in many cases. They are not any different economically, truthfully, on a lot of levels than we are. In fact, I have said on many occasions, and I'll repeat it again today, this is not about black or white. It's always been about green. And Lyndon Johnson's quote specifically states that as long as you give a poor white person somebody to look down on, and that means the best black person, anybody black, you ain't care. You ain't gonna realize he's picking you picking his pockets. He'll empty his pockets for you. What does that say to you about where we are in America and where we've been, where we're going? Now, I'm trying to understand why this district attorney in North Carolina decided to attempt to explain this debauchery without all of the footage available. Because let's face it, y'all, if that had been a black man who had done something, killed a cop, ran over a cop, any of that, they would have had every single angle. They would have released every piece of videotape to make sure that they get what they want from it. The general public would have had videotape. Videotape is what is getting justice for people today. None of this is new. Black people have been being slaughtered at every turn throughout the entire history of these United States and before on this continent, but we didn't have the technology to document it. We had our word, which didn't count for anything because as second-class citizens, we're not to be believed. Nothing we say has credibility. There are many who are still attempting to put that same ideology into effect, that the credibility of black people and their word don't count. So, of course, this district attorney has decided that his word on the matter is the final word. No judge, no jury, no prosecution, no attempt at getting to the truth. Just what he said, what he decided he was going to put out there. We all know that's a sham. Body cameras don't mean a damn thing. When an individual can cherry pick what he chooses to show, because he's got control over the cameras and the footage, he's going to choose what parts of it he wants to show you and edit and cut and do what he wants and say what he wants to say. It's kind of like, a grand jury or something like that where they indict people. You can indict a ham sandwich. There's no defense there to tell their side. There's nobody there to refute the information. So all they do is put on the information that they want the grand jury to hear and make a decision as to whether or not a person can be, that a person should be charged. It's BS. But that's the way the system works. Transparency, y'all, that's what we don't have. And the idea that an individual can be corrected and killed and not face prosecution is a throwback to 1669 laws. They're still in effect, y'all. Nothing has changed. It just looks a little different because we live in a modern society. All of this is a throwback to history and the way things have been done. This is nothing more than a justification of police brutality and the mistreatment of black bodies. But here's the part that is the most offensive. Well, let me not say the most offensive, but is also offensive, equally offensive. Anytime a black person is murdered. Now let's remember this now. They didn't kill themselves. They didn't have any weapons. They were murdered, usually with a firearm, outside of George Floyd. Well, I take that back because we've had a few gentlemen be choked to death. But whenever a black person is involved in being killed, the victim now, by police or anybody white, the very first thing, the playbook, the immediate playbook is to run a toxicology report. He had drugs in his system. He was smoking marijuana. Immediate. This is the playbook, y'all. I'm giving you the plays. This is how, like on a football game, they got to play. We're going first down. Toxicology report. We got to check, see if he was drugged. He was using drugs. He was on drugs. He was on marijuana. He was going to kill everybody. He was an Incredible Hulk. He was smoking weed. Then they run the criminal background. That's second down. We'll run the criminal background. Oh, this guy had a history of kicking cans down the road, and it hit somebody's car. They'll make a federal case out of that. You do know that, right? This is the playbook. He was a criminal. You know how many times I heard people talk about on social media and other areas, George Floyd was a criminal. Now let's remember, this man was sitting in his truck minding his own business, sleep. But they found ways in their minds to justify his murder. He was a criminal. What the hell did he do? Because clearly, even the store clerk said that he didn't think that George Floyd knew that bill was counterfeit. I don't believe he did. Hell, Who passes a counterfeit bill and then goes to sleep outside the store where they passed it at? High or not? If he was high, he was minding his own damn business. So, by that logic that made him a criminal, why do we have the perception that all of these white folks that are on pills, oh, it's an opioid pandemic. Oh, these people need help. But when crack was on the street, they're all criminals. Well, why aren't these people, these heroin addicts, these Caucasian heroin addicts and pill poppers, why aren't they criminals? Of course, they don't have to worry about being murdered at the hands of police officers either. Because we all know, how many times have we seen some white man with an AR-15 and other assault rifles be taken into custody untouched? It's just amazing. You have black folks that don't have a gun at all, and they're murdered. The history of behavior, that is the next play. Oh, we got to check. Oh, he's got a history of this and that and the other. Now, I grant you that Andrew Brown Jr. had been convicted of crimes in the past and was a supposed known drug dealer and whatever else he was. But that didn't make him a killer. That didn't make him dangerous. Now, I'm not going to sit here and speculate about what those officers claim about him using his vehicle as a weapon. Because guess what? We still don't have the rest of the videotape. So now here we are with them investigating themselves. The DA shares an office in the building with the police department. What does that tell us? That tells us that the police are investigating the police, and somehow we're supposed to just trust them by virtue of their honesty and truthfulness. Get the out of here. Y'all know. See, this is why, and I'm going to say this, and I really don't care who gets offended. There are no good cops. Now, a lot of people might take exception to that, but let me explain to you why I say what I say. Good cops, oh, they get fired. Good cops get ousted. If a good officer stood up and said that that was wrong, that was unjustifiable, he would immediately be reprimanded. They would find ways to cause him problems on his job, and ultimately he would be terminated. Like many cops have been in the past, those who were what they so-called whistleblowers. Oh, they don't want whistleblowers. They don't want to be told on. They don't want nobody. That's that blue wall of silence. See, all the good cops, oh, they've been fired. Because let me tell you something. Any officer who stands by and watches another officer do dirt, violate a person's rights, their body, their constitutional rights, and does and says nothing, oh, you a bad cop. You just as bad as the corrupt cop that just did the dirt. That makes you accountable. That makes you culpable. You deserve to be punished as well. But we already know they're going to protect each other. The police departments today are nothing but large gangs. Large gangs of rogue individuals doing as they please, going around murdering people, and everything is fine. Why? Because in 1669, the law, particularly as it pertains to black people, was that in correction of a slave, should he die, you will not be prosecuted for murder. Because you were correcting a slave. He was wrong. Andrew Brown Jr. apparently was wrong. And in their correction of Andrew Brown Jr., he died. And so Oh, well. One more off the books. He's dead. The Casual Killing Act is still in full effect. Ain't that something? This attitude and this ideology is still in effect today in America. The fox is in the hen house protecting the chickens. And when asked, who ate my chicken, the fox points the finger in another direction. Wasn't me. The fox gets to protect the hen house. The police get to investigate themselves. How do you really think that's going to turn out? All I can say is this. I hope that Merrick Garland, now for those of you who don't know who Merrick Garland is, let me tell you. I hope that Merrick Garland, who was the choice of Barack Obama as Supreme Court Justice, the one that they blocked, Mitch McConnell claimed he wasn't going to be appointing any more justices before election, which was in June of Barack Obama's last year, all the way up through to November. Yet they found it within themselves to say that the president could do whatever he wanted when Donald Trump was in office, and they appointed another Supreme Court justice 1 month prior to election. See how that works? Discretion. They used the discretion to do as they pleased with the law. They chose to give the privilege to the white man while snatching it away from the black man. See how that works? That's the same way they apply the law. And somebody would love to try and argue that with me, but the bottom line is they're snakes. It's the elephant in the room, and I don't have a problem pointing out the elephant. It's the same thing as the fox protecting the hen house from the inside. I hope that Merrick Garland steps up because, of course, we know he is the head of the Department of Justice now, which is why we've seen all these civil rights cases coming down on these officers. And in fact, while we talk about the fact that they love to use the playbook by bringing up the history of individual victims like George Floyd, because all they wanted to talk about was his history and his past, the same way this district attorney in North Carolina did for Andrew Brown, stood up and talked about all of his criminal past and all of this and that. I didn't hear him mention anything about any violence. But everything was, oh, he's this and he's that, as though that made it okay to put a bullet in the back of his head that day. See, that's judge, jury, and executioner. But that's their justification. And the sad part is that it's always okay with everybody. I just don't get that. Yes, I do. Let me not say that. Anyway, I hope that Merrick Garland, because y'all know, I don't know if you knew this, Derek Chauvin apparently had a case that he was called on prior to George Floyd with a 14-year-old, excessive force. And they are now discussing bringing charges against him, federal charges, civil rights charges against him criminally for that case, which throw the book at him. People think they get away with stuff. It's only a matter of time. It's going to catch up to you, bruh. And his time is coming. He's not, I'm interested. This sentencing, y'all do know the sentencing is coming up here. I think it's next month. And I don't think he's going to get off lightly. And I think it's about time for these people to be prosecuted properly. I hope that Merrick Garland at least steps in, because I'm still not going to say that these officers are completely 100% guilty. I would like to see the rest of the videotape. I would like for the rest of the world to see the rest of the videotape. I would like for there to be an unbiased investigation with people who actually care about the law, people who are actually interested in using the law with proper discretion, with an unbiased attitude, and do their job. Be trustworthy. Don't be a liar. That annoys me. This is what we're faced with. Lack of trust, lack of transparency in America. And I spell that with 3 Ks. I don't know, y'all. We got a long way to go and a short time to get there. So, with all of that said, I'm going to say that I want to thank everyone for hanging out with me today, listening to my rant, and somehow or another, hopefully, we're going to get it all worked out. On some level, to some degree, we'll begin to reach some levels of equality, or I don't even know what it takes anymore. I'm not going to lie to y'all. I've told y'all before, this wears me out. And I give kudos to the lawyers and activists and individuals who stand in front of the cameras every time tragedy strikes and tirelessly beats the system into submission on some level to gain some levels of dignity, justice, and equality for the rest of us, even those of us who criticize them and don't believe that we need them. We do need them. Without them, these cases don't come to the forefront. Without them, these cases don't get the attention that they need, while others sit in their armchairs and make light of the work that these people put in. And trust me, for those who think that, oh, they're just doing it to get paid, guess what? This ain't free. They shouldn't work for free. Why should they? And not only that, in case y'all didn't know, lawyers cost money. Airfare, transportation, food, all of the people, the specialists, the experts, the forensic pathologists, all of that costs money. Yes, they should be there for the money. Quit playing. Anyway, I ain't gonna lie to y'all. This wears me out. And I know if I feel the way I do, they gotta be feeling like the world is beating the hell out of them. They getting death threats and everything else. At least I don't get those. Not yet. But we got to stick together, y'all. We got to stand behind our people, even when we don't always agree with everything they do, because they do it. They stand behind each other even when they dead ass wrong. Look at Donald Trump and all his people standing up there lying, just in lockstep with their lies. We don't have to lie. All we got to do is stand together in truth, and the truth will trump a lie all day, every day. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank y'all. I'm Brian Forbes, and this has been The Black Factor. Y'all have a good night.